Ramattra is absolutely insane in Overwatch 2.
Okay.
Overwatch recently released a hotfix patch that gave out a slew of buffs and nerfs. Among those affected was Overwatch's newest hero, Ramattra. He was given more armor and movement speed while in Nemesis form, along with a reduced cooldown on his shield. This quickly propelled him into being one of the better tanks in the game. He pairs excellently with the meta supports of Kiriko and Lucio, and has one of the best ults in the game to give him one of the more diverse kits in all of Overwatch. Let's break down the basics of Ramattra's kit first, and then go into deeper detail on how to use all of these abilities to their fullest extent. Ramattra's primary weapon is his Void Accelerator. This is a slow-moving stream of projectiles that do 4.5 damage per shot. These projectiles have no fall-off damage, but can be very difficult to land at longer ranges. This is a solid poking tool, and will be your primary source of poke when playing Ramattra. The damage isn't very consistent, but it is effective when applied to enemy tanks. Ramattra's right click is his Void Barrier. This is a 1000 HP shield that lasts 4 seconds with a cooldown of 13 seconds. It is placed very similarly to a Mei wall, so it will spawn wherever you want within 35 meters. This is a great way to protect your teammates while poking, or to help you close the distance on enemies to use his next ability, Nemesis form. Nemesis transforms Ramattra into a faster, tankier version of himself. When switching to Nemesis form, Ramattra gains 225 armor and 20% faster movement speed. His primary fire changes to Pummel when in Nemesis form. This is a wave of energy that Ramattra punches forward, dealing 60 piercing damage in a 12-meter range. Piercing damage means it will go through any enemy shields except for Zarya bubbles, along with hitting multiple people in a line. He also gains access to a block with his right click. This block has no cooldown and can be used as much as you want when Nemesis form is active. This blocks 75% of incoming damage from the front, making it a very useful tool to keep Ramattra alive when in Nemesis form. Keep in mind, Ramattra cannot block the damage from Tracer's Pulse Bomb, Echo's Stickies, or Cassidy's Magnetic Grenade. Ramattra's third ability is called Ravenous Vortex. This ability can be used in either of Ramattra's forms. It throws out a projectile that spawns a large field, which will slow and pull down any flying enemies caught in it. It also deals 15 damage per second, while lasting 3 seconds in total. This ability is a great way to slow down enemies, to secure kills, or to force a lot of cooldowns from people with movement abilities. Ramattra's ultimate is called Annihilation. This automatically puts Ramattra into Nemesis form while creating a 13-meter wide radius of damage. It deals 30 damage per second and lasts for 3 seconds. However, while attached to enemies, the ultimate timer will not go down. This makes it extremely powerful, as Ramattra will be permanently in Nemesis form, along with dealing 30 damage per second to anyone trapped in it until they are dead or manage to escape the radius. Now that you all understand Ramattra's abilities, let's talk more about how to use them in the most efficient way possible. Ramattra's shield is much easier to cycle with his Nemesis form now that the cooldown is shorter. Use it to poke early in the fight, allowing you to be slightly more aggressive in the positioning you take. Also use the fact that you can place it almost anywhere to your advantage. Using it to block support's LOS from their tanks is very strong and not utilized nearly enough. Let's say, for example, you're fighting a Reinhardt who has an Ana pocketing him. Instead of placing your shield in front of yourself to block damage, place it a little bit behind the Reinhardt, which will deny him from getting heals. This gives you and your team a brief period of time where the Rein can't be healed. This means he's either going to get burst down quickly because he's not aware of the shield, or he's going to have to waste a lot of his shield to block all the damage coming in, which will give you a resource advantage that will help a lot throughout the rest of the fight. Note how the Ana has to walk into a bad position to try and keep Rein alive, and dies for it. Keep in mind that this cooldown is pretty long, so if you're not in a safe position when using it, use the duration to retreat to a safer distance, or close the gap to allow you to use your Nemesis form to its fullest potential. Let's talk more in depth about Nemesis form now. With its recent buffs, Nemesis form makes Ramattra extremely tanky and allows him to actually close distance when using it, thanks to the extra movement speed. Nemesis form will ideally be used when the enemy team is lower on resources. Play your distance as long as you can and force the enemy team to use movement abilities, and large support cooldowns to get on top of you. This is when you can pop Nemesis form and either punish them for their aggression, or retreat and buy time by blocking. Being as accurate as possible with its pummel is also very important, as Nemesis form only lasts 8 seconds. It is definitely recommended to focus down the enemy squishies when using Nemesis form, as doing 60 damage every half a second or so to a tank is not very effective. Focus down one squishy at a time when using Nemesis form, and use your block to deny large burst damage coming from the enemy team. Watching key abilities that have high damage, and specifically keeping an eye out for them, will help you to keep yourself up a lot easier when using Nemesis form. Keep in mind that Ramattra will return to 450 HP when Nemesis form ends, so keeping yourself at or above that number when exiting Nemesis form is very important. Hopefully, by the time Nemesis form ends, your shield cooldown will be back, or at least close to being back, which will give you and your supports time to regroup and heal back up before re-aggressing with your next Nemesis cooldown. Learning when to play aggressive and passively is very important when using Ramattra, let alone any character in Overwatch. Analyzing enemy comps will help you to decide how to use your Nemesis form as well. If the other team is running something more poke-oriented like a Sigma, you want to play faster and try and close distance early to get value out of your Nemesis form. But if they're running a Reinhardt, you want to play much slower and hold your Nemesis until the Rein is on top of you or you've burned down his shield. Make sure to look at the enemy comp constantly to see if you need to change the way you're playing around your Nemesis cooldown. Ramattra's Ravenous Vortex is probably his most interesting ability. The best use of this ability is probably using it on low HP or low resource targets to then rush down with Nemesis or just finish off in your Omnic form. When this ability is used in conjunction with Nemesis form, it allows Ramattra to kill 200 HP heroes with 3 pummels instead of 4. This ability is also great at comboing with ultimates like Dragon Blade, Pulse Bomb, and any ultimates that benefit from clumped up enemies. This ability can also be used to deny people from leaving after they've engaged onto you. It's very strong against characters like Winston who have vertical mobility. If a Winston dives your team, try and use your Vortex when he looks like he wants to leave. This will make his leap go absolutely nowhere and will allow your team to punish him for it. Just be careful when using it against his bubble, as it will bounce off of the side and only affect him if he walks out of the bubble. Now let's go ahead and talk about Annihilation. This might be the best ult in the game when it comes to overtime situations. When people are forced to attack an objective, it becomes impossible to actually escape the radius. Using the ult to initiate is fine if you have a Lucio or if they lack movement abilities. However, against high mobility teams, it's better to force some cooldowns first using Nemesis form. Once they've used a few cooldowns, you can pop Annihilation and get a free team wipe. This ult is also very effective at countering Kiriko's Kitsune Rush, which is probably the best ult in the game. Quick tip for Annihilation: if you're using Nemesis form and you want to use the ultimate, quickly exit Nemesis form by pressing Shift and immediately press Q. This will give you the bonus 225 armor that comes with entering Nemesis form, whereas using Annihilation while already in Nemesis form will not grant the extra armor. This lets you use an initial Nemesis form to close the distance without having to worry about blocking for your armor. Finally, let's go ahead and talk about Ramattra's matchups. Here's a tier list I made. He does great against Brig and Sim because they're characters who need to be very close to deal damage, and Nemesis form will delete both of them without much trouble. Just try not to feed Sim's beam with poor shield placement. Also keep in mind that teleport is a decent counter to your ultimate, so try and track the cooldown or focus down the Ramattra first and then use your ultimate. Most of the tanks in this second tier struggle against poke, which Ramattra has a good amount of. Nemesis form will also allow him to run away if hooked by Hog, and brawl through D.Va and Monkey's defensive abilities. Breaking Torb's turret is extremely easy because of Ramattra's primary fire having no fall-off damage. Most of the characters in this neutral category will force Ramattra to play pretty normally, which will involve him using Omnic form to poke or close distance, and use Nemesis form and Ravenous Vortex to finish off enemies when he gets in close. Be mindful of Cassidy's sticky grenade and anything else that classifies as a stick, as you won't be able to block any of the explosion damage once it's stuck onto you. Sigma is one of the tanks that Ramattra is much weaker into, as Sigma has way more utility when it comes to actually poking. This means Ramattra is forced to play for his Nemesis form and close the distance, which can be hard against good Sigmas since they'll be constantly moving backwards, though this can differ from map to map. The other heroes in this category are either too tanky or too mobile for Ramattra to do anything to. His Vortex doesn't affect Mercy, as she can just fly directly out of it with a Guardian Angel. Mei's Wall is also a very good tool against Ramattra and really any tank, as most of the time it will force them to use all of their resources to survive it. Don't sleep on Mei in this meta, she could end up being a very good pick. Also, be wary of Ana if you don't have a Kiriko on your team. Sleep Dart can shut down your ult entirely, and Anti-Nade is always a very strong ability. Finally, the characters he's really bad into. Zenyatta's Discord Orb is very strong against heroes like Rein and Ramattra who like to close distance. Try and focus down Zenyatta as much as possible when playing against him, or use your healing advantage to run over the other tank. Orisa is in a very strong state right now and excels at bullying the enemy tank to the point where they can't really do anything. The best thing to do against an Orisa is to ignore her as much as possible and focus down the squishies. Ramattra also can't do anything to a Pharah, as his Void Accelerator isn't nearly consistent enough to do enough damage to her or the Mercy who is likely pocketing her. That's about it when it comes to the basics of knowing how to play Ramattra. Hopefully this guide helps everyone who's been trying to learn him since he was recently added into competitive. If you guys want to check out my socials, they'll be down in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you guys later.